also, it isn't just the scandals within that academic unit. And I've said many times, and I think I said it when I was interviewed by your group, that there's two responsibilities as a scientist. You've got the responsibility in the laboratory. These guys weren't even meeting those responsibilities, as we now know. But when you go public and say that your science is legitimate and should be the basis of policy, there's a whole new set of responsibilities kick in, and they didn't meet those either. In fact, they deliberately thwarted them. So it's on two completely different levels. But the first thing that we got to do is we got to shut down the IPCC. It's got to go.
Absolutely. We have the top scientist interlaced with the UN climate study group, and you also study them individually. They're all globalists. They're all pro-New World Order. They're all socialist. Yep. They all want to cut human resources. They all want one-child policies. This is a very sick group, and studying them separate from the climate debate, studying them, being persecuted by them. You're one of the first people they singled out because as a top climatologist, you were effectively countering them. What type of individuals are these people?
Well, as you said, and by the way, the University of East Anglia, where the CRU is located, and I had the privilege of dealing with Hubert Lamb, who's the father of climatology of the modern era. He helped me with my doctoral thesis. I mean, he'd be turning in his grave. But it was set up there. The University of East Anglia, which, by the way, has been complicit in blocking freedom of information requests, as has the United Kingdom Met Office. So this thing permeates through government. But the University of East Anglia was set up under the Harold Wilson socialist government in Britain, and it is considered the most left of all the left-wing universities in Britain. So this was a perfect place for this CRU thing to fester into what it's become. And, of course, the person that there's two sides to it, of course. There's the political side and the science side. Now, the guy that put those two together is our old friend Maurice Strong. And, of course, Maurice Strong, I think, is hiding out in China right now because the U.S. government want him for his involvement with Kofi Annan in the oil for food in Iraq thing. But Maurice Strong was the one that set up the United Nations Environment Program. And he made a statement 30 years ago that he said, isn't the problem for the problem for the planet are the industrialized nations? Isn't it our responsibility to get rid of them? And I want your audience to think about how would you do that? If you consider the industrialized nations like an engine in a car, and that's a very good analogy because fossil fuels and energy are critical to them, how would you go about doing that? You say, okay, I can stop the engine by shutting off the energy supply. And as you see that happening, and the impacts on energy, but the public would scream right away. We saw that when the fuel prices went up. Everybody's angry immediately. So you really can't do that. But if you say, look, the byproduct, the exhaust of this engine, and you can stop an engine by plugging the exhaust. So if you say, look, the exhaust of this industrialized nations or this car is CO2, and it's destroying the global climate and destroying the planet, then you can point at, this evil industry, this horrible industrial complex, and this whole free market thing, we've just got to shut it down. It's destroying the planet. That's why CO2 became the focus, even though it's an absolute minuscule part of the total complexity that is weather and climate. And of course, Maurice Strong set about to do this. Now, in a book called The Cloak of Green by Elaine Dewar, who, by the way, started to write a book praising all the environmentalists in Canada, and as a good journalist, the more she dug, the more she discovered that these people were more corrupt than the corporations they were attacking. And 20% of that book is devoted to Strong. And she said to him, if you've got these ideas, why don't you run for politics? He probably, the only honest statement in his life, said, well, you can't do anything as a politician. He said, I'm going to go to the UN, and there I can get all the money I want and not be accountable to anybody. And that's precisely what he did. He set up with Kofi Annan, and he became the senior advisor, and he set up the United Nations Environment Program, and a subset of that was the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, one one of the things, Alex, that to help people understand how these sorts of machinations are done, because Strong was incredibly, I mean, it's like with Gore's movie, you cannot deny it's a superb piece of propaganda. And with Maurice Strong, you cannot deny his talents in persuading people and managing bureaucratic systems. And one of the things through my own experience, I've chaired many boards of commission and commissions of inquiry, and it's a perfect vehicle for the politician, because there's a fight going on, and the public are saying, why don't you do something here? Well, the politician says, okay, we'll have a commission of inquiry, and it'll be arm's length. And everybody say, oh, good for you. Finally, we're getting somewhere. But what they don't know is that the politicians continue to retain control. Now, first of all, if the media come along...
Well, stay there. Obviously, government funding over institutions, they don't get the funding if they don't give the results that the UN wants. We'll be right back with climatologist Dr. Tim Ball. This is incredible news. Dr. Tim Ball is our guest. He's a big part of Follow the Republic. I'm going to put a plug in here. Until they run out, you get a free Obama Joker T-shirt, and there's 4 different messages on them. You can pick the T-shirt you want, free, when you order 1 copy. I just want to get this film out. People are ready to hear. This film is about the banks, how the elites engineered the climate change fraud for the global tax. And now we have Von Rompuy, the head of the EU, and saying this. We have Al Gore and others saying it in the film. Everyone's got to see this. So you want to know about the climate fraud? What's really going on? These are not scientists and the UN just screwing up on accident. This is premeditated. Going back to Dr. Tim Ball, this is a short segment. Sir, I just want to stress that we can't let this go by the wayside. They've been caught in so many other frauds, but again, they could say that was an accident. This is red-handed, and you were telling me during the break, the tentacles of this go into all of government and the entire power structure, and they're not going to quit just because this fraud came out unless we really get this message out. That's why we're seeing a huge broadcast TV blackout on this.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, the atomic bomb went off, and most of the mainstream media didn't hear it. But just a quick kudo to you, Alex. The YouTube 9-minute video. Your grasp of the issues in this is really remarkable, and that's been one of the problems, because most of the media are not scientists, and one of the things with the public is they're going to have to need a lot of these emails explained. What are they saying? What's the context of this? And of course, it's why some of the attempts to block what's out there is saying, oh, they're taking it out of context, and they can get away with that. But the minute somebody like myself that knows what's going on, watched it go on, put it in context, it just becomes even more explosive. So yeah, absolutely. And by the way, just back quickly, I was talking about terms of reference. In my own experience, Maurice Strong wrote the terms of reference for the IPCC. And as I said, when I chaired commissions of inquiry, and your audience can think about the Kennedy Commission, and they asked Judge Warren about, well, why didn't you look at the mafia and Dallas connection? He said, oh, it wasn't in my terms of reference. That's how the politicians control. And the first commission I was given, the minister gave me the terms of reference, and I said, Mr. Minister, I can't even begin to look at this, let alone reach some conclusions. And he said, well, that's the way it is. And I said, no, here's the way it is. I'm going to go to the media and say, you're tying my hands on this issue. Well, he obviously decided that that was a bigger problem than trying to tie.
Okay, go back. Explain to people what minister in the context, because you're talking about lying by omission. They set the parameters of the debate. They say climate change is real. It is bad. It is man-made. And they say the debate is settled.
Yeah, okay, because what Maurice Strong did was, the first thing is they used the definition of climate change established by the United Nations Environment Program, which says we're only going to look at human causes of climate change. Now, you can't possibly determine what effect humans are having, if any, unless you know how much nature is causing climate change. So by limiting that to IPCC with that definition alone, the second important thing, and there's some other terms of reference, but the other one that's devastating is they put in what's called the summary for policymakers. Now, the group at CRU made sure that the scientists that were advising that summary for policymaker groups, which were mostly politicians, were part of their CRU group. So people like Stephen Schneider, Michael Mann, Phil Jones. But the summary for policymakers, the rules of it are, you write your science or technical report, working group 1, you set that aside, then the summary for policymaker groups will write a summary. The summary then is released to the media immediately, which of course, and then it has all of the sensational stuff about, oh, the world's going to fry and this is going to happen. Then the summary goes back to the scientific group with the instructions to make sure that the scientific report says what we've already said in the summary and released to the public. So it's like an executive doing a summary and then telling the employees to find the facts to support the summary.